The following story is a story that I first told when I was making my personal accounts number 2 video about a year and a half ago. So this is a bit of a rehash of that story, and then there is an update afterwards. So here's the story. I am about to retell the same story that I told in personal accounts number 2. If you would like to skip that part and go right to the update, skip this video ahead to 11 minutes even. I had my first baby a few years ago, a son. The odd occurrences started almost immediately when I had him. I kept a log when the strangeness started, and this is an edited version of what I wrote. I bought my newborn son a plastic aquarium for the side of his crib for his first Christmas. It runs on batteries, and when it's turned on, it lights up, the fish float around, and it makes noise. When my son was born, he really didn't like music as much as he liked the white noise or water sounds. So bubbles on a medium volume is what I left it on. My son decided that he would rather sleep in Mommy and Daddy's room rather than by himself in his crib across the hall. So that's what we did for the first 3 months. A couple weeks after we got the aquarium, it started turning on by itself when nobody was in the room. It only ever did it in the wee hours of the morning, such as 1 a.m. or 3 a.m. I would wake up to my son's room glowing blue across the hall and the bubble sounds. One time it turned itself on and off, on and off, on and off, over and over again, to the point that I could not count how many times it happened. I figured that the toy was broken or it had a wiring problem, and aside from being a bit weirded out by the toy turning itself on and off again, and being really annoyed by being woken up from precious sleep, I didn't really give it much thought than that. The toy eventually drained the batteries, and against my better judgment, I did replace them. After this, the toy would continue to turn itself on and off. My son finally started sleeping in his crib, and this is when the toy started changing the settings that I put it on. Now it plays classical music on full volume when my son is taking a nap in the crib, no matter how many times I put the settings back to bubbles on medium volume. Okay, it's just a broken toy, right? The batteries died again, and I did not replace them. My son had an electronic swing that had 6 speeds. When the swing is on, the speed that it's on lights up red. A number of times the swing has turned on when we are standing beside it, but nobody is touching it. This was weird, and maybe another one of his toys has a wiring problem. I bought my little guy an electronic book, and about a month later, the toy turned itself on at 1 a.m. and started talking and singing as if someone was playing with it. I did not get out of bed as I recognized the sounds from the toy, and the toy eventually turned itself off, as it does if it isn't being played with, to save the batteries. I thought, wow, these toys really do have lousy wiring, huh? My boy loved his Jolly Jumper. I bought him a pad for the floor that makes noise when he jumps on it. It even makes noise even when my son is in bed. It has gone off in the middle of the night, and it even went off when my mother and I were in the room sitting next to it. I figured it was yet another wiring problem. He has these little cars that consist of a police car, a race car, an ambulance, and a fire truck. They all sing songs and say phrases about whatever kind of vehicle it is, but they have to either be pushed on their wheels or have a button pushed on them in order to make them go off. Every one of those cars will go off when nobody is in the room, nobody is touching them, and they haven't moved. When one of them starts to go off, it will do that anywhere from a few songs to around an hour. He also has a flashlight that sings and of course lights up. The flashlight will also go off when nobody is touching it, and it'll keep going off for minutes to an hour. I also got him a leapfrog learning table. This toy makes lots of noise. Suddenly this toy started playing on its own. My mom was babysitting, and after my son had gone to bed, the toy started singing and wouldn't stop. My mom changed a setting on the toy, and it was silent again, until about a week later, in the morning. My son was awake, and his toy was on the table, not being disturbed. All of a sudden, it started singing the alphabet. When it was done, it sang the alphabet again, and again, and again, and again. I picked it up off the table and changed a setting like my mother had done before. The alphabet played again. Then it was silent for about 10 seconds, and I thought it was going to stop, but then it played again. Then another song played after about 30 seconds of silence, and then it played again. This went on for 90 minutes. It stopped as suddenly as it started, and it didn't happen again that day, but it will abruptly start playing every once in a while, maybe once a month for around an hour each time before it stops. I bought him a Thomas the Tank Engine train that comes with a remote control to make the train move. It also talks and makes train noises. Of course, out of nowhere it starts introducing itself, saying, "Hi there, it's Thomas." Then it goes on to compliment my navigational skills by saying, "You are a very useful engine driver," which is only something it says when you are making it move with the wireless controller. At this point, this doesn't even surprise me anymore. I start expecting this kind of thing with his toys. It is worth noting that my mother has an entire house full of baby toys for him to play with that sing and make noise, and not a single one of them ever plays when nobody is touching it. It just doesn't happen. I could see if one or two of his toys do this, but almost all of them? Apart from the electronics, I do have other examples of my son's friends, as I call them. He was always looking, laughing, and smiling at someone we can't see. As he started to get older, he started pointing to nothing, whether it be in the hallway or just at a blank wall in his room, like he does when he wants me to tell him what something is. He also does this with photographs. He will point and say, "Ah," and I will say, "That's Uncle so-and-so," or "That's Mommy's friend whoever," and he enjoys this. But when he does it to a darkened hallway, I don't quite know what to say other than, "Mommy doesn't see anything there." On a number of occasions, he has lifted his arms out like he wants whatever he is seeing to pick me up, the way babies do. He follows things around the room with his eyes and seems genuinely happy that whatever is there is there. One night I was sitting on the couch after my son was asleep, with his baby toys on the floor in front of me. He has another toy train that isn't electronic, and it doesn't move unless someone is pushing it. His toy train lurched forward about a centimeter and made a crashing sound as it hit another toy. I'm not sure how old my son was when I started getting woken up in the night with baby cries. Now, he was a bad sleeper right from the get-go, and everyone who has had a baby knows that if your baby starts to cry, your eyes pop open immediately and off you go to feed, change, or cuddle. So it started happening where I would be asleep, wake up to the sound of a baby crying, look at the video monitor that we have, see my son sleeping, and be kind of baffled. I would crank up the sound on the baby monitor, and the sound was not coming from there. When this happened, I could not get back to sleep while the crying was going on. It was just not possible, because my brain was telling me to stay awake for the sake of my baby. I would even get up and go into his room to check on him, and he is sound asleep, making no noises. Now, I could chalk this up to being a sleep-deprived new mommy, and in fact that is exactly what I was doing, until my husband started waking up too, hearing baby cries and asking me what was wrong with our son. Of course, we can't stop the cries because our flesh and blood baby in the next room is sleeping. We didn't tell anyone about our nightly awakenings, until one day when my mom was babysitting by herself. When I came home, she mentioned to me that she just kept hearing a baby crying and absolutely could not find the source. I told her that we were hearing the crying as well and to just try to ignore it as we were doing. The phantom cries at night did eventually stop, although I'm not completely sure when. They just sort of decreased in frequency until it stopped altogether. I felt badly for the baby who was crying, and I would help them if I could. Unfortunately, I'm not sure where to start. Now that my son is older and talking, the toys randomly going off has completely 100% stopped. And we have almost all of the same toys out for him to play with in the toy room. But he does get woken up in the middle of the night, about once or twice a week, saying that there's a woman in his room and she's scaring him. He says that she has black, messy hair, and she doesn't talk to him or look at him. Sometimes he says that she's up by the ceiling. I have no idea where to start with this problem. Now, this is where my story originally stopped. My son was seeing the woman, as he refers to her, in his room. She woke him up at night, and he was terrified of her. I started asking all the friends that I have who won't think I'm nuts what I should do. I did not want to tell my son that it was all in his imagination or that he was making it up. I wanted him to know that I believe him and that I was on his side completely throughout this ordeal. He was not making it up and is not making it up because he is so afraid of her. One friend that I had told me to fold a paperclip into a figure 8 shape, but don't close the two sides of it so it stays open a bit. Supposedly this was going to make it possible for her to cross over. I never fully understood this logic, but I did it anyway, just so my son wouldn't be afraid anymore. I made about 5 of these paperclip infinity signs and put them all over his room. It didn't appear to have any effect whatsoever. So the next thing that I did was I started to be very stern with her. I told her in my most authoritative voice that this was scaring my son and she was not allowed to do that anymore. My son was very young and it wasn't fair for her to do this to him. Now, this seemed to work, at least for a while. The awakenings at night seemed to stop and we were all able to sleep soundly again. About 6 months after he last mentioned seeing the woman, my son seemed to be doing well. He was in school and everything seemed calm. About 3 months ago from today, I noticed that my son was refusing to go down the hallway by himself. If he wanted to go to his room, to go to the bathroom, or to go into his playroom, he was asking for adult accompaniment. This seemed odd to us, and we tried to make him go down the hall by himself, and he always refused, then begged for us to come until we finally relented. Now, I was chalking this up to him getting older and having irrational fears about what lurks in the shadows. Finally, 2 weeks ago, my son and I were in my room, and my husband was out. My son asked me to come with him to the bathroom, and I said no because the bedroom is right beside the bathroom, and I'm right here. He started to get upset, and I asked him what he was afraid of. He was refusing to tell me. I told him to go to the bathroom by himself, and he started to cry. I took him to the bathroom, and then I sat him down and demanded to be told what the problem was. He told me that the woman is in the hallway now. She doesn't come into his room anymore, but she's still there. She stands outside of the 3 rooms that I mentioned, and when he's in the playroom, he can see her watching him. I asked him why he didn't tell us this before, and he said that he was afraid. He wasn't afraid that he was going to get into trouble from us. He is afraid of her. He doesn't want to make her angry. I have again told her very sternly to leave my son alone. I do want to know who she is and what she wants. I want to know why she's picking on my son. I'm curious as to what happened to the apparent ghost children and why they went away when she showed up. I'm not afraid of her, maybe she knows that. But my son is. She probably bothers him because he's the only one who can actually see her. I do not want to attempt any actual communication with her, other than telling her to stop scaring my son, because I do not want this problem to get any worse. Any suggestions that you guys may have would be greatly appreciated. So that is it. That is my story. I hope you guys enjoyed it. This is going to be the only story this week, and hopefully, I think maybe by Friday we should have a full show of 5 stories from Reddit out for you guys. Thank you very much for sticking with me. Hope I haven't been complaining too much for you guys. If you enjoy the stories, share, like, and subscribe. And I will talk at you later. Okay, bye.